Hello, I'm Executive Chef Joseph Schutze, and welcome to our kitchen. Today I wanted to share with you a recipe and technique for making one of my favorite dishes, a Hungarian classic called Pörkölt. Pörkölt is somewhat of a comfort food, and it is something that I grew up eating, and to this day I can eat it 5 times per week. Today's variation, we will be making Birka Pörkölt or lamb Pörkölt. Many people ask me, what is Pörkölt? To make it simple, Pörkölt is simply a braised meat with some onions and paprika and a little bit of a thick sauce that comes with it. The meats that are typically used, but not limited to, would be lamb, venison, wild boar, pork, beef, things like of that nature, the heartier meats. Where today we will be using a spring lamb, so it will be a lot more tender and is going to cook a little faster than most of the lamb used in Europe. Most of the lamb used in Europe is actually mutton, which by definition means that it is older than 2 years of age. People have also asked me, what is the difference between Pörkölt and Paprikás? To keep it simple, Paprikás is Pörkölt with sour cream added to it. That is it. If you can make a Pörkölt, you can make a Paprikás. However, Paprikás is typically used with leaner and more delicate meats, for instance, duck, chicken, rabbit. Again, not limited to those items. Now that we got that covered, join me now as I show you how I prepare this. Well, to begin, we have our lamb. I have a couple different pieces here. I have one piece that is a boneless leg of lamb, in which I will clean a little bit of this fat off, and then I will cut it into small pieces, bite size. And the other piece I have is a lamb leg that was raised here in Wisconsin, still has the bone in it. And those of you who have watched my channel before, and those that know me, also know I'm always about using meats that contain the bone. Just so much more flavor and richness comes out of the dish itself. And if it's something that is somewhat of a soup or a dish that has a stew or a saucy type of dish, the richness that comes and the gelatinous texture and consistency that comes from the marrow of the bones. So let us begin with breaking down our meat and cleaning it up. To begin, I like to heat my pot over medium heat and add some blended oil to it. Add a fair amount, probably close to half a cup. Then I will begin sweating my onions. The best pot for braising can either be a braiser, a Dutch oven, or a rondeau, like what I'm using. Essentially, any pot that is shallow and wide and also has a lid. That is the optimum vessel for braising. Well, now that my onions are translucent and very aromatic, this step is a little different than the traditional recipe. At this step, many people will put in the tomatoes, the paprika, and the spicy peppers. However, I go the different route. I will now add my lamb. I put the protein in now because I really want to develop intense lamb flavor. And I feel that if you put the vegetables first, you don't really get that. You can with a long cook time, but I want to not take 4 hours to cook this thing. So I got my meat in there, it's all cubed. I'm also going to add the bone. Why not? What's it going to do besides give more flavor? And maybe take up a little spot in our braiser, but we have enough spare room. So let's let this start cooking. Stir it occasionally. Try to let the juices release. After about 5 minutes of cooking, I will then start adding a little bit of salt. Then I add my tomatoes, Hungarian paprika. Let's give it a stir. Now the peppers and tomatoes are optional. Now we'll give it a turn. Let's now add our ground paprika. Give it a stir. Be careful. You don't want to cook it too long at this point because the paprika has a high sugar content and will burn very easily. So I just turn it enough to incorporate it into the liquids so it comes up almost like a paste. Now that we got that, I will go ahead and add my lamb stock. Don't mind this. It was pulled from the freezer this morning and hasn't thawed out quite all the way. So now that we have our stock and all of our ingredients in there, let's go ahead and put the lid on. And when it comes to a simmer, reduce to low and then simmer it until the meat is tender. Well, here we are after about an hour and a half, 2 hours. It is a little bit soupy, so I am going to allow it to cook a little longer. If you do want to keep it soupy like this, that's perfectly fine. It's just a little more liquid for you to lap up with the bread or the pasta or dumplings. Also, if you want to thicken it a little bit and keep this much liquid volume, you can always add a little bit of tomato paste to it to help deliver a thicker consistency. I'm going to let this simmer for about 10 more minutes to hopefully reduce a little bit and make it a little less liquid for me. And then we are ready for service. Well, there you have Birka Pörkölt, lamb Pörkölt. This can be done with anything protein-wise, from beef to veal, turkey, bear, anything you want. It's just simply braising the meat with paprika, onion, some tomato, and that's about it. Very simple. The dish itself is extremely flavorful, and in this case, I'm actually serving this with pasta. The other day we had the Preheat paprikás, and I made dumplings for that, so I just didn't want to do dumplings again. Try to do something a little bit different. Now, there are different routes to get to the end result here. As I mentioned before, many people put the tomato and the onion and the peppers in first in order to build your base, and then you put the protein in and start braising it. The reason I don't do that is because, one, I want to intensify the protein flavor, whatever it is, this case lamb. And the onions and the peppers and the tomatoes will break down because it's a couple hour process, and the thickness comes at the end anyway. It doesn't matter which way you go with it. I prefer something spicy, Hungarian peppers on top. That way I can have raw ones in with it. Just adds a little texture, crunch, and heat. So I hope you enjoyed today's demonstration. This is actually a request for my friend Tundi Milstein in Long Island, my Hungarian friend, and her favorite dish is the lamb Pörkölt. So I figured, what the heck. If you've not done so, please subscribe, be up to date with our latest posts, and stay tuned for what comes next. Thank you all for joining. Jöjjt vajat. Egészségedre!